Welcome back to the show. In this episode, we have a great interview lined up for you. Comics writer Stephanie Phillips joins us, and we do a round of this or that, and we also talk about her work on her PhD, as well as her love for hockey. And our episode spotlight for this week is the podcast All Day with Ellie. She's actually been a guest on this show a couple of times. And if you love to hear different perspectives about different topics or viewpoints in the geeky fandoms, this is a great podcast to check out. I highly recommend it. I will give you a link to her show in the show notes below. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to The Capsule Life, a show for the most casual and dedicated fans of comics and a member of the Comic Watch family. I'm your host, Sean. Join me and discover what the world of comics and graphic novels have to offer. From one-on-one interviews with industry professionals, roundtable discussions with passionate fans, and reviews on the latest comics, TV shows, and movies. Now let's dive right on in. So we have a fantastic guest on the show today. Many of you may know her and her awesome work, but for those of you who do not know her, let me introduce to you our guest, Stephanie Phillips. Stephanie is an American writer known for comics and graphic novels such as Harley Quinn, Wonder Woman, Grimm, and We Only Kill Each Other. She has written critically acclaimed work with some of the industry's major publishers such as DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, Image Comics, Boom, and more. Stephanie, welcome to the Caption Life Show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I noticed that you actually just came back from a trip to Europe. Is that correct?
Yes, 7 weeks.
Oh my gosh, 7 weeks. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yes. It was 6 countries and 7 weeks. So it was pretty
kidding. Good. was it just like a fun trip that you were doing that you've been wanting to do, or was it like work related or?
Using conventions to kind of bounce around. So like starting at Napoli Comic Con in Italy, doing a convention in Greece, and then Belgium and London were kind of just our thing. And then back to conventions, like doing a signing in Spain and ending with a convention in Budapest. So,
no kidding.
Yeah, it was a lot.
So have you been to any of those countries before?
Some of them, yes. Some of them were completely new, so it was a good mix, I think, of like revisiting and getting lots of passport stamps, which is my favorite thing. So.
Yeah, awesome. So out of the countries that you visited, which one did you really enjoy going to on this trip?
Belgium, for sure. I like Belgian beer, and just being able to like walk out of like there's a convenience store that was like on the corner of where I was staying, and it was like they had beer there so cheap that in the US you can't even get in the US, and if you find it somewhere it's like $40 a bottle, and there it's just like $5 in a convenience store, and you're like, wait, what? So that was definitely my favorite, though. As much as I want to live there, I also am like, how much beer I would drink would probably be problematic, so maybe it's good. I don't know. But the comic museum there was also really, really cool. Like getting to see kind of how they like really revere like comics and all the different shops and the way they treat pop culture. It was really interesting. So
no kidding.
Yeah, Belgium was absolutely my favorite place that we went.
What's the name of that museum? I kind of want to check this out now. Do you remember?
No, it's just like it was just like the comic museum in Brussels.
Okay.
I don't know if it has another name other than that, but they have rotating exhibits. They have some stuff that stays. Like they're big on the Smurfs, obviously. So there's a lot of Smurf stuff. But no, it was like really cool to see pages from different artists and just even the comic shops, like walking into the comic shops and seeing like how nice their editions of things are. And
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. That sounds really interesting. So, well, cool. Yeah, I've heard some great things about Belgium. I've only have been to a few countries, and that's Italy and a really weird one like Croatia, which the reason being is because when I was growing up, I was raised Catholic. And so there is a place, not necessarily in Croatia, but I think near there, called like Medjugorje, and I went on a pilgrimage there with my family and stuff like that. And so that was like the only reason why I went there. Like I never, imagine myself saying like I want to go to Croatia, by any means whatsoever.
Oh, I do though. I've heard it's supposed to be really nice, and I think there's a comic on there. So
yeah, no, it's actually a really nice country. I just, before I went there, I just never really had any sort of like desire to be there and all that. But like when we went through it, it was a very, very pleasant country and really nice to kind of travel through and stuff like that. And so, and I'm not Catholic anymore, so I like have any desire to go back and check it out by any means whatsoever. But Italy and Croatia, and it's not technically in Croatia where I ever went to, but I can't remember. I think it might be Bosnia. I can't even remember the name of the country that's in and all that. But those are the only two places I've been to. I know at some point I would love to go to England and Ireland because I have some family in Ireland I want to visit at some point as well too. So
okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's so great. Yeah, and I remember you talking to me about how you're going to Europe because we actually talked a little bit at C2E2. I stopped by your table there, and actually, I wanted to point out, like, I have this over here on my shelf here, but this is the DC Pride issue from last year, and I actually have you signed this here because your story in this book was actually my favorite one of the entire book. Yeah, it's something that I really enjoyed because your story in there was, was the story about Batwoman Kate Kane, but it was being told through the eyes of her father. And me being an adoptive father, like it resonated with me so much in terms of what a father wants for their child. And I absolutely loved it. I think I teared up like reading it and everything. So it was definitely my favorite story from that book. So
I appreciate that. That was a gift for my dad. I actually like all the pages of it. I like cut out of one of the books and have it framed together. So it's like the 4 pages together. So I wrote it for my dad because his birthday was like, I think the week after Pride was coming out. So it was done so intentionally for him, but
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I bet he loved that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I hope so. It's like, he might be getting tired of every year getting something comic related, but I can pull from.
Yeah. I understand that completely. So, well, again, Stephanie, thank you for joining this show. And for those of you who haven't listened to an episode of when we do an interview, we like to do interviews a little bit different with comics creators. So we'll definitely talk a little bit about comics related topics, but we also want to when we interview our guests, we like to get to know them a little bit more beyond their work of comics as well too. So with that being said, I usually start off the interview asking about your comic book origin story. So I wanted to ask you, what was it that got you into comics? Was it a person that got you into it? Was it a book that you picked up? What is your comic book origin story?
No, I mean, I liked comics. I guess my origin story is pretty boring. I was in graduate school and wanted to do something other than academic writing. So I started doing comic stuff. I wrote a short horror story for Black Mask, and and then I did a book for Dark Horse that I think got picked up by some editors at DC, and then went and did a short story with Riley Rossmo over at DC. And yeah, that was a really good thing. Riley has become one of my best friends, favorite people to work with. It's kind of spurred our Harley Quinn run. So
awesome. So you, if I heard you correctly, then you didn't even get into like reading comics until graduate school then, is that right?
No, I've been reading comics, and I think that's why I was like, well, this is the thing, like I read them a lot, I like them, maybe this is what I will try writing. And I'm not sure why I jumped to writing comics over something else. Like I think in my brain it was like, well, I like pop culture and it's such an escape for me outside of graduate school that it's like, well, I could try writing video games, I could try writing a comic, and it felt more concrete to say, like, if I wrote something for a video game, it'd be like, well, how do I go give this to a video game company? Like it didn't like compute of how to do that. And getting into the industry of video games was like, it was a little tricky given that I was in graduate school. I was kind of on the path to becoming a professor. So it was like, I'm not about to go like apply at Blizzard and say like, peace out to this career, which I eventually did anyways, but it was more like I have a story I want to tell. I think comics would be appropriate for that.
Hmm.
It was a short horror story, Black Mask. Took that story from myself in Man House, which was kind of like my first introduction to it, and then yeah, it just kind of spiraled into a career kind of accidentally because I had a career. So it was kind of doing a complete switch,
Hmm.
after I was a professor at University of Buffalo. So I quit to do this full time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, we'll talk about that a little bit more because I want to talk to you more about your PhD and your experience in
Mhm.
academia. But I mean, I know for a fact because I work for a university that, being a faculty member and that whole process of like one getting a position and then, going through tenure and stuff like
Yeah.
that is like its own little world that is just,
Yeah.
fascinating to say the least. So yeah. And I've heard, people who went on to try to become a faculty member, and then the more they're in it, the more they realize that it wasn't for them, and they left that because of that reason and everything. So, but I think personally that you made a great career change and great career choice.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely what I prefer doing.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, so thank you for sharing your comic book origin story. So the next part is to kind of get to know you a little bit more. I like to do a game with our guests called This or That. So for those of you who are not familiar with this, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Stephanie, just a series of pairings. So I'll kind of say, would you rather do this thing or that thing? And then Stephanie will give her answer. We'll, talk about, a little bit about the answer and all that. And we have like a list of 10 of those kinds of pairings that we're going to ask you. And so it's a very popular thing, I think, on Instagram. A lot of people will put
Okay.
stories on Instagram, I think, where like people can like circle like which one they would rather or something like that. So that's
Okay.
what we're going to do here. And these are all non-comic book related, so that way we can get to know you a little bit better. So the first question I want to ask you for This or That is board games or watching TV?
Watching TV. Yeah.
Awesome. What what
I
what sh- what show or series are you really into right now?
Probably I think you should leave, which I've seen 500 times, but I'm not going to stop. It's addictive. Actually, it was like last week. Tim Robinson was at the Cubs game, and they did like a Dan Flash's Cub shirt giveaway, which I didn't get one, but it was like the crazy pattern shirts with like the Cubs logo in them. But no, I feel like I speak entirely, and I think you should leave quotes, and it's ridiculous.
I love that. I think that's one I haven't seen yet. So I'm probably
Oh,
gonna have to
okay.
do
You
that.
should go
Yeah,
check it out. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
on a rewatch of Arrested Development right now.
Oh, cool. The
Yeah.
like the first part of the series or the Netflix series?
Yeah, no, the original, I found out my partner hadn't seen it, so I'm like,
Oh.
we need to so it's been like it's good because it's quick. It's like 20 minutes. Yeah,
Hmm.
I like TV, but I mean, I think more than anything I watch sports. So I will usually put on any sport because it's just so different from like if you're working on a comic script all day, then
Yeah.
yes, I want to watch a dude swing a bat at a very fast ball and like not know what's about to happen.
Yeah.
That would be nice, but
Oh, that's really cool. That's really interesting perspective on that, though, because I would imagine like if you're writing a story, like it's good to have something like sports on there, just like we said, like you don't know what the outcome's going to be, but also
yeah,
I would imagine like it's kind of nice because then you're not, potentially being influenced by like a show that you're watching when you're writing your story. Like you probably
yeah.
want to have like a blank slate to, kind of work from that. So, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, and not questioning like, oh, I wouldn't have done it this way, which maybe is like a weird. But if it, because like I write in genres that I appreciate and like to watch or engage in, so that gets a little tricky. But with sports,
Right.
it's like, being on the off season for too many leagues right now. I'm like, it's like mostly baseball now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I bet. Yeah. Art gallery or history museum?
Oh no. Oh, that's a tough one. I think I go to more art museums.
Okay.
Like, yeah, traveling, that's usually one of the first things to look at is like, is there an exhibit to go see or like a gallery
Hmm.
that's open in this city? Um, So probably that, but sometimes I think they're very combined. Like
Mm-hmm.
uh the history of the city or the artist. I really like that element to what I'm going to see.
Is there a art gallery that's at your absolute favorite that you've been to before?
Um Favorites? No, I mean I think exhibits like in New York, was it I think it was MoMA had a Merritt Oppenheimer exhibit last year that was probably my favorite art exhibit I've been to. Like
Mm-hmm.
I knew the name of it and I just ended up like absolutely falling in love with her work, just being like, holy shit, like her voice and um kind of like a sarcasm that comes through in what she was doing. I was like walking through this exhibit of amazing things she made, but also just laughing. I was like, oh my God, she is so like kind of giving the middle finger to everybody with this thing that she's created. And
Uh-huh.
I like that. No, that was really, really cool and well done. We're in Chicago, so there's a good museum here, easy to get to. I think the Dali Museum in St. Pete, Florida is very well done. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I didn't realize you live in Chicago, by the way.
Yeah, you're what, Indiana, right?
Yeah, yeah. I live in
Okay.
Indianapolis. I'm like only like 2.5 hours away from there. So
Yeah. Oh,
that's
my
cool.
family's in Florida, so I
Hmm.
go to Florida a lot. But yeah, yeah, Chicago's nice.
Awesome.
I like it. There's a lot to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's like especially the Midwest. Like that's really a neat town to go to because it has a little bit of everything. When you think of the major cities in the U.S., you got L.A. and New York as obviously the first two that comes to mind. But
Yeah.
Chicago is really should be up there because even though it's in the Midwest, it's a huge city that has a lot of
Yeah.
everything that you expect from the other big cities too. So I really enjoy
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Oh, me too. I'm still learning. I was never taught to parallel park
Oh
ever.
yeah.
So that has proven challenging. There are times where I'm like, I can drive here and it would be so easy, but I know there's no like there's a very large chance I will have to parallel park, in which case I can't do that. So
Right.
um it's on the list of things to learn,
Yeah.
but we'll get there. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of walking, or which luckily you can do easily here,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
Uber. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, or you can, hopefully the technology will catch up where, most cars will just have the parallel parking technology that you could just hit a button and it'll just do it for you.
yeah, that's possible. I'd be open to that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would.
Yes,
um, Big city or small town?
big city.
Yeah.
Yep, I think that one's easy. I would have said small town probably years ago, but
Uh-huh.
just I don't know. I like music and breweries and art
Hmm.
museums. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That makes sense. Yeah. Would you rather write an email or write a letter?
God, neither. I don't want to talk to. I don't want to talk to anyone. um,
That's
uh,
fair. Yeah, I mean, we can say like I get that, so you can just say neither, and that'll be fine.
sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess I kind of like. Uh, I mean, I've written letters. I think it's more personal. I don't do
Right.
it often, but like I guess I would go slightly more letter, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I can't remember the last time I've actually wrote a letter, but I know me personally, I prefer email just because I'm, and I think a lot of people like this, but I'm just faster typing than I am writing. And
yeah,
like, I feel like I can get a lot in there in a shorter amount of time. So for me, it's more like efficiency than anything else. So,
right, right. Yeah, I also don't really open my mail, which is like I
oh,
feel like if
okay.
it was a
Yeah.
problem, I would have been arrested by now. Like if there was something really pressing in there.
Yeah.
But if somebody really wanted to get a hold of me, they would
Uh
have
huh.
figured out an alternative way, which makes
Mm-hmm.
mail redundant. And
Yeah.
I also get a lot of mail from people that like aren't me, or to somebody that's like not me and doesn't live here or something. And it's like,
Right. Like a
so I
neighbor
don't
or
know.
somebody that was living there before or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. We've been in our house for a long time and we're still getting those kinds of mails all the time. So, yeah. Now, I don't know, if you've seen either of these shows, but I thought this would be interesting. Do you prefer watching Friends or Seinfeld?
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld?
Yeah. Yes,
Why is
absolutely.
that? Just kind of curious.
I don't know. I don't know that I really got into Friends. I think
Hmm.
the idea of it was, I don't know, whatever. But God, Seinfeld, like George and Elaine are
Yeah.
fantastic. So it's, I don't know, it's classic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I grew up watching both of those, but I think I watched Seinfeld a lot more than Friends. And I mean, they both have their, quirks and everything like that. But Seinfeld was definitely, I think it was like the most watched show at that time. And I think the final episode, I think, had like the most viewers at that time as well too, like
Oh,
for a series finale as well. So it was definitely, when you think of like the 90s, you definitely think of, Seinfeld when it comes to television, because it was the show to watch that everybody watched.
yeah. No, that
Uh,
was probably more rewatchable for me too.
yeah.
I don't know that I've ever sought out Friends, but I've
Hmm.
definitely clicked on a Seinfeld episode on a plane or something.
Would you rather be able to fly or to read minds?
Fly.
Fly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd rather get somewhere faster.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted me to know what they were thinking, they would tell me. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's interesting is that this is actually, I didn't even think about this until just now. So this is definitely not planned by any means whatsoever. But I guess there was an episode on the podcast This American Life from NPR that my brother sent me. And I guess somebody was really into superheroes or whatever, but he would pose this question to friends of his. And I guess he did like a really critical psychological breakdown of like what kind of answers people would give and as to why. And it got down to, depending on how you answered it and what were the reason or rationale behind it, it kind of revealed like what your nature as a person was, in terms of would you do things for good or for evil. So it's like a very seemed like it's a very non-controversial question, but the more he kind of asked and dug deep into some of these things, like, and I can't remember if it's exactly like fly reminds, or if it's like, I think it may have been like reminds or invisibility or something along those lines. Like I think it was something like that. But yeah, it was just really fascinating. Just like that seemed like a simple question that a lot of people in nerddoms and fandoms and all that would like ask that kind of question, and then it got down to, it revealed a lot about yourself as a person. So now I'm just like, I don't even know if I want to answer some of those questions for fear like somebody's going to start like internally judging me for that sort of thing. So
I don't think I would use it for good or bad. I would just be in Belgium drinking beer,
right?
watching football. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, and reading minds, I feel like it's a lot more intrusive than flying by nature. So like you could definitely do it ethically, where you let people know and you ask them like for permission, stuff like that. But I feel like it's still kind of an evasion on, at the basic minimum level, whereas like flying is not at that level by any means whatsoever. But I remember talking about this on social media, where I feel like when you read some stories of superheroes or villains in comics, like depending on the power they have, it could be like already tell that, from the moment they're born, that they're going to be a villain, right? So like the example I used was Mystique, and how Mystique is a shapeshifter. And like, if you think about like by nature, that's a very, on a basic level, deceitful kind of power. And that like, how do you use that sort of power for good, unless it's like very, very circumstantial, but by its nature, it's misleading people or kind of lying to people and stuff like that when you use it. And so it's like you can't really blame Mystique, completely for turning into a villain, for being able to do that, because I think a lot of shapeshifters and comic stuff like that are tends to be villains, because that's like a really handy power to have as a villain for that. So it's really interesting to think about like powers at that level, and like how it can almost predetermine if you're going to be a good person or a bad person.
Right. Oh, it is. That's interesting.
Yeah. Would you rather explore the deep sea or outer space?
Definitely not the ocean. I guess if it's this or that, I guess space, but
Yeah.
I'm happy to die on Earth. I'm good. I've got no, I don't know. I'm good right here.
Yeah.
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and especially both places, I feel like there's a lot of things that you can't be in control of that could like ultimately decide your fate too, you know? Like
Mhm.
if you're outer space, you know, if there's like a crack in your ship or something like that, like there's not much you can do because you don't have those resources to like fix those things. The same thing with the sea. You know, I guess you could probably get up to land quicker, but
Oh,
yeah.
apparently not. Not if
Well,
you're,
yeah. That's true. Yeah.
I don't know. I'll let the millionaires go do that. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm good. Good right here. Good.
Yeah. Would you rather sleep in or stay up?
Mm, ooh, sleep in, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, you know, and thinking about that question, it's almost like if you like to stay up, then you're probably somebody that likes to sleep in as well too, because you've been up so late.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
They
that's a
kind of
bad
go hand
question
in
on my
hand.
end. Yeah. So my bad.
No, I think what it boils down to is I'm not a morning person. I think that's what the
Gotcha.
question is getting at. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably. Yeah. So yeah. Next time I'll have to kind of make sure to think through those pairings a little bit better. So, would you rather give someone a handshake or a hug?
Um. Oh God, I guess it depends on who. Handshake. I'm not real. Yeah, I
Right.
don't know. I'm kind of still in fist bump mode, I guess, from uh pandemic or
Right.
whatever anyone else has. I don't know. Even
Yeah.
a cold.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, and I remember when in the first year of having the pandemic, I remember someone saying, you know, what might be a good idea, you know, culturally, is to get away from handshake as being like the appropriate gesture when you're greeting someone to doing what Japanese, I think Chinese do this, where they bow to each other instead of like making physical contact. And honestly, I'm a big fan of that because I always feel like even though like I'm a hugger for the most part, like when you first meet somebody, like I always feel like physical contact is always
Yeah.
awkward and weird to begin with. So I love the idea of like, yeah, like, well, why don't we bow instead of, you know, making like actual physical contact? Because I feel like that's like still very respectful, but you're not, you know, potentially contracting a contagious disease or something, or, you know, or
Yeah.
even if there wasn't a pandemic going on, like I feel like that's just kind of a nice way to greet somebody without kind of invading someone's space too. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm not super touchy, so.
I get that. All right, then last question. Do you prefer the 80s or the 90s?
Mm, um, I guess maybe musically the 80s,
Yeah.
which is kind of, I guess, what I go to in my mind. But I don't know. I mean, both good, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and they kind of blend a little bit as well too. Like I feel like, again, probably another question I probably should have vetted and think through a little bit more, but it's like, you know, especially when you kind of look at the decades, like you can think about things are very distinct. But I feel like with 80s and 90s, they tend to be a little bit more blended together. Like I think the only thing that was really more distinct from the 80s and is the 90s, that 80s had more like the neon color stuff going on, where the 90s didn't really have that. Maybe the early 90s, but didn't have that as like the identifying marker of the decade.
Right.
And you know, and grunge rock came out of the 90s as well too, where like 80s was still heavy metal band stuff like that, but you know, the with Nirvana and Green Day kind of joining on the scene and stuff like that, that's been kind of like a calling card for the 90s is grunge rock, you know, being the thing.
Yeah.
So cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I feel like I know you a lot better now and know you as a person with doing that. So that was a lot of fun. So, okay. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience with getting your PhD in rhetoric and composition, because that's something that I've noticed that you put in your social bio that, you know, you have a PhD, and I think that's really cool as well as important to kind of share that little tidbit because, again, you know, in this day and age, we kind of just known by like what we're, you know, known for and everything. But I think it's really cool that you share with people that you do have a PhD in rhetoric and composition. So you were talking about it a little bit, but what made you decide to go on and get a PhD? And then kind of maybe talk about like, you know, through that process and everything, you know, maybe give us a little bit more details about what made you, you know, switch from becoming a faculty member to going into writing comics professionally.
I think I just kind of went to get a PhD. Like it just seemed like a natural progression. Like
Mm-hmm.
you I was good at school. So
Yeah.
you can hide in school for a while. I just kind of went straight from undergrad into a master's program, straight from master's into a PhD, and just kind of thought I would be a professor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't even entirely know why. It was just kind of there. It was in front of me. It was, um, you know, I liked elements of school, I guess, because I was good at it. And
Mm-hmm.
then, partway through the PhD, it was just also kind of like, I think becoming a little disillusioned with the notion of the ivory tower. Like,
Right.
academia can be really problematic. There's a lot of inequity. Um, I call it a bit incestuous because you were doing research and writing for maybe one other person that's doing this very specific niche style of research.
Mm-hmm.
And it is its own language, which at one point I thought was really cool to be like indoctrinated in that and to learn it because it's like, oh wow, you have to be like super smart to like be able to learn this. And if I can master that, then I would be super smart. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the smartest thing ever is making the work that you do inaccessible to a general group of people. I
Right.
actually think that that's the opposite of smart. I mean, if nobody can argue with you because they don't know what you're saying, I don't think that makes you intelligent. I think that is a problem. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
are generating knowledge for people, well, really, you're not generating knowledge for anyone except yourself and maybe one other person that's trying to learn this kind of language you've created.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I find it interesting that that's happening, but um, I don't know. And when you try to kind of buck against that in any way, it becomes like, well, this is work we can't publish.
Mm-hmm.
It's. I once had something rejected from an academic journal because they said it was like something like it being too easy to read, um, which is a really
Interesting.
weird, yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't quite those words. It was something along those lines of like
Mm-hmm.
being very clear and concise. And it was like, well, duh. Like that
Yeah.
is that is my goal
Mm-hmm.
as a writer is to be clear and concise.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It made me. I feel like just a couple of years into the PhD, I got very like, what is this? Like, what are
Right.
you people doing? I think some of the least intelligent people I know have PhDs, and it's like that's because you're kind of all hiding in here, giving it to each other, and conversely, some of the smartest people I know also have PhDs. But
Mm-hmm.
it was a very weird. I don't know. It didn't feel like the right place to be saying anything.
Right.
Um, so kind of taking some of that work that I did, things that I was interested in, a lot of it appears in comics I've written in a way that I think it's like trying to work through those ideas with the readers
Mm-hmm.
and in a way that is more accessible. I mean, I don't know, maybe comics are still a bit niche, but I'm going to go ahead and say I've had more readers on that than any academic work I've published.
Right. Yeah. So with your undergrad and master's degree, like were those also in writing, and were they at the same institution, or were they at a different university?
Different universities.
Okay.
Undergrad, I did history and English. Master's degree was in English, and I did like a technical master's degree in technical writing. And
Mm-hmm.
then PhD, I left literature and did rhetoric and composition
Gotcha.
instead. So yeah,
Well, switching topics a little bit. So I want to make sure we talk about your PhD, but I also saw that you are a fan of hockey as well, which
yes.
I love because I grew up playing hockey. My own origin story with hockey is that I never like knew anybody that played hockey, and then the movie The Mighty Ducks came out, and then that's what got me to play hockey at like the age of 9. Which
Yeah.
at that point, like when I started playing, people have been like playing since they were like 3 or 4 or whatever. So I felt like I was like late to the scene and all that. But I remember like after watching the movie, I went out to the front yard, told my dad, I really want to start playing hockey now. And I remember like that moment where he just kind of sighed and just said like, all right, like he must have known something I didn't know. Like
Mhm.
he must have known like, the cost and time involvement and stuff like that, which for me as a kid, you don't think about those things. But I could just see like, apparently his world just kind of changed after I said that because of his reaction to it. But since then, I mean, we've been a huge hockey family, and we all love like watching and playing hockey and everything. But I'm kind of curious, like what got you into hockey yourself? Like, did you come from a family that also loved to play hockey? Was it like,
Nope.
was it Mighty Ducks?
No. It was the Tampa Bay Lightning. It was just like growing up with the team, like as they were kind of growing in Tampa. Like I remember some of the first games I went to, that was like, I don't want to be here. Like, what is this? And just like being around it enough, especially the first time that they had like a Stanley Cup run, it was like, it's freaking cool. Like, I mean, being obsessed with it, my walls were covered in posters of like LeCavier. I think I had an Anderchuk poster in there. I know I had Bobby Boulin over my bed. I just had like it was like him breaking out of a blue brick wall, and it just said like the Boulin wall. I think I got it at like a Toys R Us, which is ridiculous. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, I loved the Tampa Bay Lightning, and just like watched so much of it that I was like, I want to try. Did roller hockey for a long time, and then teenager I made the switch to ice because I was in Florida and it was a little harder to come by and wasn't very close. So I don't think it was until I could really like drive myself somewhere that I was like, all right, I'm gonna switch the rollerblades for ice skates and see how that goes. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, and it's always fascinating to me because there's places like Florida and California and even Texas where people don't see snow hardly at all, right? And they go into a sport where it's like cold and like ice. And I remember I used to be a mission counselor for a university where we had a lot of people from Florida would come to our university because of football. And I remember it was being culture shock for them coming up to Indiana, and that if it was 60-degree weather, like we could walk around in a shorts and a t-shirt in 60-degree weather, but people who are from Florida never experience that. Like they're freezing and have to like wear coats and stuff like that. And so I was always found it fascinating that hockey in Florida. And I think they have at least two teams: the Tampa Bay Lightning and Florida Panthers. I don't think they have a third one, right? I think it's just those two. Yeah, and so I always found it fascinating that they had hockey down there in a climate where people don't see snow or ice in that sort of capacity. So it's really cool. So Tampa Bay Lightning, which I've never been to a Tampa Bay Lightning game before, but I've heard that it's a lot of fun. Like when we went to Tampa Bay a couple of times, and I see Tampa Bay Lightning posters and like merchandise and paraphernalia like all over the place. So it seems like Tampa really loves their hockey team. And I think in terms of sports, do they have another professional team? Like do they have a baseball team down there as well too?
And football, yeah. NFL is,
oh, that's right.
Bucks.
Yeah, the Buccaneers. Yeah, that's right.
And
I forgot about that.
Technically, there's the Tampa Bay Rays, but they don't play in Tampa. So.
Oh, okay. Well, gotcha. Kind of like how the New York Jets actually play in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. They're actually like in St. Pete. It's a pretty far drive, but 15 minutes from me is Yankees spring training. So it's
there you go.
I grew up going to Yankees games and not Tampa Bay Rays games.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
Awesome, cool. So playing hockey then, when you made the switch to ice hockey, like what position did you usually find yourself playing for the most part?
I gravitate towards right wing.
I
don't know. It was just, I think I was probably put at it. And then much later when I moved to Buffalo, one of the teams I was playing on never had enough defensemen, and I'm a better skater than I am a shooter. Like I'm really good at skating. And I think maybe it was just like being smaller. It was like I developed that skill more than others. I was like, well, I can skate backwards. I can do all that. That's fine. And so I jumped into that position, and I was like, man, I should have been doing defense all along. It's just like being a giant wrecking ball. Like this person is in front of my net, and I'm going to do everything in my power to destroy them. Like, oh, you even look at the goalie wrong, and I'm going to like, this is going to become a bat. Like, oh, it's so much fucking fun. Being absolutely unhinged defenseman. That is
Mm-hmm.
that is that's what I'm good at.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds like that was your own personal like anger management experience for you, right? I what's interesting is growing up I played center for the longest time, but I was also like the tallest kid like for the longest time. I think ever since even first grade, I was always the tallest kid in my grade. Now I'm 6'6", and I've been 6'6" since I think seventh grade. But I've always been, kind of at the taller end. And so when I played mites and squirts, they always had me at center. But then when you got to Pee Wee, like other kids started growing and going through, puberty, and then they started to get, caught up in terms of like how fast I can skate and everything. So they moved me back to defense because I wasn't as fast as the other kids. I mean, I was pretty decent in terms of speed and all that for someone my size and everything, but because of my size and how bulky I was, I pushed people around, so they moved me to defense, and that's all they told me. Like, just go hit people and take slap shots from the blue line, and that's what I did. And I did it really well, and like people got upset when I hit people because they thought that because of my size, I probably I probably did hurt some people, like just because of that. But like, it was never like anything illegal or anything like that. It was all clean hits and everything. It was just that, when you got a kid like that's at your hip and you knock them down, like it just looks really vicious because of the size difference by by all means. But you're right. Playing defense is a lot of fun because it gave you all the reason to like hit somebody for no reason, like you can't do it legally, but it's like it gives you a reason to go out and hit somebody if you really wanted to do that. So that's a lot of fun. Now I kind of want to get into adult league and start playing hockey again.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with some pickups, I think. Probably here in Chicago and see how that goes. But
yeah, I was about to say, I'm sure Chicago has a lot of like pickup adults, opportunities up there. So Indianapolis, we don't. Some. Yeah, Indianapolis, we don't have a whole lot. Like, on my side of town, we don't have an ice rink. So it's like if you wanted to go to an ice rink, there's like 3, maybe 4 rinks on like the richier side of town, and then there's one on the south side, which is like not like impoverished by any means whatsoever, but like the north side of Indianapolis is known for that's where the richier people are at. So, well. Another question I want to ask you is, so you and I first met at C2E2 earlier this year, which I mentioned earlier in this episode. But, I know that there's always like fun stories that people have at conventions when they interact with fans or, people that come up to their tables and things like that. So I wanted to ask you, like, what's a really interesting interaction that you've had with somebody at a convention before?
I tend to, I think I have really good interactions, which is nice. There's, I've met a fan now a couple of times named Oscar, who gave me this really cool, it's on my dresser every night. It's like an alpaca who's wearing this handmade little like poncho that says "I killed comics" on it, that Oscar made for me. And I love him, so I named him Oscar in honor of his.
That's cool.
Maker.
Yeah.
No, that was really sweet. I don't know. I think internationally there have been some really interesting ones, like people getting my work as a translation and then coming and having conversations about that. I have a fan in Greece that I've seen now a few times when I've gone to the convention there, and I feel like she needs like a royalty check from Boom, because she's like my grim pusher. Like the last time I saw her, she came with like a group of maybe like 5 other people, and she's like, they all just got Grimm #1, and here you are, and here they are, and they're gonna read it. And I'm like, are you just forcing people to read this book? Like,
she has that kind of power.
Yeah, like I'm not complaining, but I enjoy that. I like the chance to kind of talk with people, and I think comics are interesting because they're not super isolated. Like there is, and obviously we know a lot of the horror stories of the accessibility of comic creators and the industry with the fans.
Right.
Like we all know that, but I think there's really good in there too. And actually getting to talk to people is a benefit to the job the majority of the time.
Right.
Like, yeah, there have been weird things, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure there would be in most other industries as well at some
Oh,
point.
definitely.
So,
Yeah.
so I appreciate the fact that the good far outweighs the bad.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Well, that's good to hear. Now, you had talked about Oscar's alpaca having the sweater that said, I killed comics. I also saw that, I think, on one of your social media bios as well, too. And I got to say, I don't think I know the story behind this. Is
Oh,
there a story
okay.
behind I killed
Yeah.
comics? Like, is that something you want
Um,
to share? Or,
yeah, it was somebody that was like online kept following my accounts and saying it was some long post about how like um I in particular had killed comics for them. Like, oh, I killed comics in cold blood. That was the line, which is great. It's like you just handed me a gift. Like, what a fantastic line. I mean, it was very much saying like they didn't like I think it may have been about me writing the Pride issue that you have behind you, something about like too
oh,
many
really?
characters are gay and they are not interested in reading this and there's too many
Mm,
women. It was like it was a longer post. But at the end of the post they were like I because of you I won't be reading this. You killed comics in cold blood. And I was just like, okay. And a lot of it seemed very targeted at LGBTQ content. So
right.
I
Yeah.
made a shirt that said I killed comics in cold blood, and all the proceeds went to the Trevor Project to
Oh,
assist with at risk LGBTQ youth.
yeah.
So yeah, we made a shirt and we found a website that would like host it and directly just send all the money. So I didn't even have to like take it and give it. It was like if somebody bought it, the website, which is great, would just automatically like that money would go there. So
Right.
yeah, just kind of stuck. And I don't typically engage with comments like that, but that one was just it was
Yeah.
very specific. It stood out. Like I liked that line. That was pretty funny. But the content itself, I think, is representative of people um, really not accepting other voices or other characters. That if it's not for you, that's okay. There's plenty of content out there that's not for me either. I
Right.
don't hate that it exists. It's for somebody.
Right.
Um, so I'm glad that people have content for them.
Right.
It's fine. Like I don't have to read it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought, we'll just take the opportunity and make a shirt. Why not? I like
Yeah.
making shirts.
Well, and for for organization with like that as well too. So honestly, I had no idea about that story, but I will say that that's a very common thing I've been seeing on social media in terms of like the kinds of criticisms. Like you said, it's clearly about LGBTQ or gender and sexist and things like that, and it's unfortunate because a lot of the arguments, it's the same argument, over and over again. They don't really go into a lot of detail that's really, at least not really compelling for me. It seems like it's like kind of the same, talking points I've seen over and over again in terms of like why it's bad. It always boils down to because of this thing. And so it's like I feel like that's not really ever like a good critique of that sort of thing. Like clearly it's something else that's bothering them from what's happening. But I'm sorry to hear that you've had that experience. It seems like at least you're able to kind of come out with it with some sort of light at the end of the tunnel and all that. But I hate
Yeah.
seeing that happen. Especially like I write reviews for Comic Watch all the time, and I always end up reviewing a comic that is not written for me by any means, because I'm not I'm an ally, but I'm not a member of the LGBTQ by any means. But I read and review that, and it's always those reviews that end up getting comments, and those kind of comments as well too, of
Yeah.
like people like saying things like that. So I did one on the Tim Drake Robin issue that just wrapped up, and of course I see this all the time when it comes to Tim Drake, is that somebody posted the picture of Stephanie Brown Tim Drake kissing as a way to say like Tim Drake was straight before you made him, they'll say gay. I'm like, well, he's bi, so like let's
Right.
get one thing straight, like clearly you don't care that much, so. But yeah, it's it sucks that happened, but I love the story of like how you made it and kind of like own into that. I think that's really empowering to hear that sort of thing that that you were able to do with it. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it turned into something kind of cool, and it raised like a good little chunk of money. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
Awesome. Well, the final question I have for you before we get into the comics we're reading segment, and this is coming from a reviewer of ours from Comic Watch. This is from Seth Romo, and he wanted to ask you that he knows you've done a lot of writing on historical fiction, but wanted to know if you have a favorite historical fiction book that you recommend to readers in general.
Yeah, I don't know about fiction, but historical. I read a lot of Eric Larson. I think that's not Savage Dragon. Eric Larson, a different one.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. Eric Larson is, I think, now that Cormac McCarthy's dead, probably my favorite living writer. I think he makes historical events read like they're fiction, even though everything that he writes in there is completely factual. And I think he does such a good job of researching. He's got a journalism background, and I've listened to a lot of interviews with him, and I think his approach to history is also interesting in terms of taking small events and making them really personal for the reader as a way to help you engage. And that's something that whenever I do write historical fiction, it's like I try to keep that in mind. Like, this isn't a textbook on World War II. This is still a story about this person. And interestingly, he manages to do that with full factual historical writings, like give you this person to root for, or this person to engage with, that makes the story so personal. And then at the end, you're like, oh man, all of that was true. And it's it's really well done. And I like Eric Larson a lot. He wrote the Chicago it's about the Chicago World Fair and the serial killer that was in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Why am I blanking on the name? It's probably his most famous or well-known book. Shit. I can't think of the name, but Devil in the White City, is that it?
Yes, that's
Eric
right.
Larson. He's got one on the Lusitania. He's got some on like Hitler's rise to power. They're all of them are fantastic.
Right. I've always seen Devil in the White City like pop up as a suggested read, and it always sounded interesting. But now, that you recommend that, I'm probably going to have to put that on my to-read list. And once I get caught up on my other books and comics that I have piles and piles of, like just sitting over in my corner here. So at some point I will. Yeah.
No, he's great.
Awesome. All right. Well, before we get to our final segment of the episode, just want to remind people that the Caption Life show is part of Comic Watch, which does reviews on comics, TV, film, anime, pretty much anything that you want to write a review on. We do that. That's related to comic books or adjacent. And so if you're looking to be a reviewer, we do have a link in the show notes below for you to check out and apply. We usually respond to people within 7 days. It is completely volunteer, but it's made up of a great group of people that are fantastic. And I think, anyone who joins can tell you that, they enjoyed it and that they really love being part of this group. So even if you've never done any sort of review like before, this could be a really good springboard for you to start off with. So definitely check out the show notes if you're interested for the application to become a reviewer for Comic Watch. And then next week episode, we are going to talk about the Eisner Award winners, which will be really interesting because when this happens, we usually record Sunday night before the episode comes out. And so we'll just find out Friday. So it's going to be kind of like a quick turnaround to do this. But next week will be an episode talking about those who have won the Eisner Award. So with that being said, let's talk about the comics we're reading. And usually I have listeners chime in on what comics they're reading, but because we're recording this a little bit ahead of time, we won't have that included in this episode. So I'll go ahead and start off with you, Stephanie. What comics are you currently reading right now?
I don't read a whole lot of comics outside of stuff that I need to read for what I'm working on. Right now I've been rereading some Cormac McCarthy since he died recently. It just felt like reading some of that. And though I am doing a reread of Scalped by Jason Aaron. I just saw Jason for ALA, and he had made some mentions of Scalped, and I was like, man, I know I have that, and I would like to kind of get back into it because I know it's fantastic, and Jason is one of my favorite writers. So
right.
I'm kind of doing a reread of Scalped.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah. I don't think I think I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it by any means. So I'll definitely have to check that out sometime.
Yeah, no, it's very very good, very gritty, very dark. I like crime, so I'm typically a big fan of Jason, Garth Ennis,
Mhm.
the other Phillips that I'm not related to,
Yeah.
Sean Phillips. Yeah, yeah, I like that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Which, and by the way, I have to share with you before I start sharing with the comics I'm reading. You wrote "We Only Kill Each Other," and I absolutely love that book. We actually had
Oh,
Peter
thank you.
Krause on the show to talk about that book.
Oh, okay.
And talk about the artwork and everything like that. But I absolutely love that book, and it was great having Peter on the show to talk about that whole process and everything as well too. But that is a really good if you're someone that's really into a more of a historical comic book piece, like this is a really good one. And I think it was just a really interesting story. I think it's historical fiction, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like actually based on anybody or it's just inspired by or anything like that, but it's a
It is.
really
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really good one. I really enjoy
you.
it. So yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, so the comics I'm picking up this week from my comic store is going to be Darkwing Duck #7, which I've been absolutely loving, and they just announced that they're going to be doing a series on Negaduck, so I'm probably going to be picking that up when that starts releasing as well too. But I'm a huge Darkwing Duck fan, so I'm going to be picking up that week, as well as Spider-Gwen's Shadow Clones #5. But I'm also currently reading Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe because I've never read it before. And for those who don't know, like I have this really strange theory that I don't think it's actually actually what's happening. But with Deadpool 3, there's been a lot of rumors about cameos that's going to happen in that movie. So we talked about this probably, we're probably going to get Ben Affleck as Daredevil showing up in the movie. They've talked about there might be some people from the Fantastic Four original Fox movies, other people from the X-Men properties. And I just had this weird feeling that they're going to do some sort of Deadpool kills the Fox Marvel universe, to kind of set up for the MCU. So it just got me, thinking like, I want to read this book now and just kind of see how this all, come about and everything. And so I've been reading that, and that's actually been a lot of fun. And it's just, classic Deadpool stuff. And it just, it's a fun character. I never really got into Deadpool before the movies, and since the movies, like I got into reading them, and I just absolutely love. I don't think I've read a Deadpool comic yet that I haven't enjoyed yet. So yeah. So well, Stephanie, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you a little bit more. Before I let you go, if people want to follow you on social media or engage with you or anything like that, where can they connect with you?
Well, I guess Twitter's kind of like gone now, so
it's just kind of floating out there, yeah.
Yeah. Instagram is Snap Crackle Steph, like the Rice Krispie cereal Snap Crackle Pop. But Steph,
I love that username, by the way.
It's old.
It gives me a chuckle every time I see it, though. Like it's so much fun. I love it.
If I knew that would be so much more heavily utilized today than it was when I created it, but whatever.
I get that. Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and I want to wish you the best of luck with all the stuff. Like I said, I've been a big fan of yours. I love everything that you've been doing so far. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and talk to us a little bit more about Stephanie. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up another episode of The Caption Life. You can follow us on social media at Caption Life. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionlife.com.